Hi everyone, I'm back with another video from the Season 6 PTR. This time I want to talk about Victimize Rogues. I've already released a few videos about Rain of Arrows, Death Trap, the new Dance of Knife skill. In general, it looks really good for the rogues. They have a lot of really good builds, and Victimize passive has been kind of a hot topic in Season 4 and Season 5. Especially in Season 4 we used to have, like, for example, the Heartseeker rogue with Victimize. That was kind of a big thing. And in Season 5 that was bugged out and didn't really work. And now it has been redesigned to work a little bit differently, and it's really powerful. So what you see here right now, for example, is a Flurry Victimize Rogue that can clear a Pit 100. You see here I'm actually comfortably doubling the timer, and even the boss damage is not that terrible. Flurry in particular is a very good carrier for Victimize because it has very high lucky hit. It also just received some upgrades in the form of new weapon tempers. For example, now you have a chance to hit twice temper for Flurry. That previously was only a thing for range skills, but now melee skills kind of like got parity here. And in the case of Flurry, you actually have very high lucky hit per attack. So especially in those massive pulls, you can like just decimate elite packs in seconds. But then when the density thins out and on the boss fight, you will do noticeably less damage. So that's kind of one of the downsides of Flurry. But it works just fine. And I've cleared, for example, a Pit 100 with this here. So this was here, Scourge of the Land boss. And yeah, it took me like a few minutes to take him down. This was with a very high-end setup, to be fair. So something to keep in mind here, that this is, yeah, it's like fairly optimized already. But yeah, it was working out just fine, I gotta say. So this was pretty good. And there's also another version of Barrage. So we have this here, a Respect after that. And then I went with Barrage, Victimize, kind of similar to how maybe you might have played the Barrage Undyer's rogue in Season 5. This is all the same concepts. We spam Barrage, we have the Starless Skies ring, we have no witnesses and a Death Trap to activate our preparation and these kind of things. And this is how we scale up the damage. So this is actually kind of the same as the Flurry thing I just described. I also have a planner for this Barrage version. They both work exactly the same in like the overall concept. It's just there's a different core skill involved. In both cases, the core skill itself doesn't actually do any of the damage. It is just the new Victimize. Because the way that the new Victimize works is that it has its own damage value. It's just like a weapon damage value, similar to most aspects that just have any kind of flat damage, for example. And this is how Victimize now works as well. So it doesn't actually mirror the original hit damage like it did back in the past. So that's kind of like the main big change here. So we don't try to scale up our core skill, we don't put ranks into those, we literally have like a rank 1 there, and then we start blasting. In fact, I've actually played this Victimize Barrage stuff for most of my leveling journey as well on my first character on the PTR. So I actually started with this and it actually went surprisingly well. So early on you can, for example, do the Flurry stuff that I just described, because Flurry is a bit slower and it also has less cost per attack, so it's easier to sustain the resources. So for the early game this is a better choice, I would say. But actually pretty early on I already went with Barrage and it worked just fine. And eventually for like the high-end setup, it is fairly easy to get the resources going with Starless Skies and innovation ranks and an Umber Crux dagger that has innovation. And in that case, you will not really have much issues with resources anymore. You just try to like mega spam the Barrage and to get a lot of attack speed. And it seems to be just a slightly better version of Victimize than Flurry can be. You see here, I'm also roughly doubling the timer. It is definitely less damage in AoE combat compared to Flurry, but it has better overall like consistency and damage output on the boss. That's the advantage of Barrage. It doesn't have these wild ranges where Flurry can hit like, you know, half the screen, and if there's like 20 enemies, you proc Victimize of all of them. And when there's only one target, you only have one target to proc Victimize from. So you don't have these like overlapping explosions that just like explode everything. Versus Barrage, where you just shoot into the pack and you generally just hit with most of your arrows anyway. And there's like kind of like a certain cap to how much damage you can put out, even if we have very large pulls. But you have the way better single target. So that's kind of like what I felt about this. Either way, I would say both are viable. And you see here, for example, Barrage is still decimating this T100, including the boss here. So we also had like, yeah, for example, Bramble. And yeah, he is also just kind of melting in those stagger phases. Also, again, with a pretty high-end setup. As I mentioned, I used most of the same stuff. Since I already had the Flurry pretty much decked out, it was a very minor tweak to go to barrage setup. They all work exactly the same. Either way though, it looks really cool. There's also like Dance of Knives Victimize that is on the menu, I would say. I've actually made a video about Dance of Knives already the other day. That probably is the best version of Dance of Knives right now. So it's the new spin to win core skill, agility skill actually for rogues. But this has to be built slightly differently because, for example, you don't spend any resources on that build. So you have to not include, for example, starter skies. So it's a bit difficult to make that work. And you have to like get something else in there. There's like a few other things with the runes you have to change for Dance of Knives because you, for example, can't stand still and activate some of your runes and these kind of things. But overall, the same concept. So Victimize is just kind of like a very powerful new tool for rogues and actually creates a whole range of builds that are all fairly the same. So Victimize, you try to scale the lucky hit, you try to scale vulnerable damage, attack speed, and then any kind of generic damage multipliers. There's a bunch of glyphs also that give you vulnerable damage, like the exploit glyph, and also with the legendary bonuses that have been introduced, there is diminish and chip glyph. So you want to usually have all three of those just to ramp up your vulnerable damage that still stacks up the Victimize modifier. And like this, you end up with like a very strong combo that works with basically most of the core skills besides, I would say, Twisting Blades. And yeah, actually even something like Heartseeker or so would also work if you really want to. If you like to play like the old Heartseeker Victimized build, you can kind of still do that. It's not going to be like the best version of a Victimized Rogue, but for people that want to play Heartseeker at all costs, this is a thing. Otherwise, there's also like the real Heartseeker build, basically, where you deal damage with the Heartseeker and not just Victimized procs. So that's also possible. Right now in Season 5, for example, this is very powerful and it will definitely remain so in Season 6 as well. So if you want to jump in on a PTR and try it out before it goes down, then I have this set up for you here. This is the Barrage Victimized planner that I made here. I didn't make one now for Flurry and so on, but as I mentioned, there's only very few changes you have to make, which is basically swapping out the core skill and yeah, swapping out one aspect or something like that. And then you can play the same with Flurry if you really want to. So I would also recommend like either one of those two. As I mentioned, Dance of Knives, there are some tweaks. I actually do have a Dance of Knives planner as well. I can link that as well for Victimized Dance of Knives. That is also a thing. And then Twisting Blades, I would not recommend. Twisting Blades is mostly just best played with like a poison build, so it's like a very different setup. And then there is Pen Shot that actually also has very high lucky hit. So the lucky hit is really what matters here. And Pen Shot actually does that fairly well, but it will probably be even better than Flurry in AoE, and then probably even worse than Flurry on single target. So you will have a bit of a boss problem here with Pen Shot, but technically it is also a viable option for Victimize, especially when you don't go like all the way to like pit 100 and you really like Pen Shot, then you can also do that. It also has a few other nice perks here with the upgrades, and you can kind of hit the entire screen, so it's just nice. So there are some of these options, but I'm just showing the Barrage one. As I mentioned, you must only just change out the core skill and then one aspect. Like in this case, you have high velocity, the Barrage Pierce and attack speed aspect here on the neck. And this is what you would have to swap then for example, the Flurry hits in a circle or the Trick Shot aspect from Pen Shot. Rapid Fire is probably just kind of like a worse version of Barrage, so I wouldn't really recommend that. You would also have to get a Scardo's Kiss ring that doesn't really help you with much and just gives you this AoE effect basically. And then you could do Rapid Fire, but it's, yeah, just, you wouldn't do that when Barrage exists, really. There's like a real Rapid Fire build, like the Rapid Fire Precision setup with, for example, Cold Imbuement. That is like a pretty standard build these days that has been in the game, mostly since Season 3, I guess. So you switch to Precision if you play Rapid Fire and then make this like a crit build and not so much a Vuln build or so. But yeah, the way the setup works is we have, for example, Fist of Fate to give us a lot of lucky hit. We also have a bunch of other items that can do that, like the new Air of Perdition helm. And we also have a bunch of stuff on the skill tree. There's a kind of like an advantage that gives you lots of attack speed and lucky hit. And we try to sustain our resources with mostly just innovation. So with all this lucky hit, we can trigger resource procs here. So every time we fire Barrage, we get around 10 arrows, actually exactly 10 arrows, with the chance to cast twice tempers that we have on our weapons here. So if you have enough, you get 10 arrows. You can even hit multiple times with the pierces, for example, and the ricochets. So in AoE, this is very easy, but even on single target, you want to sustain your resources, of course. And this is done with innovation. With all this lucky hit, this will trigger all the time, multiple times per attack. And this means that especially with a Star Disguise, it's very easy to sustain resources, but it is possible before getting this ring as well by just putting more innovation tempers on your jewelry, for example. This is a temper recipe. And then you can have like 10 ranks on innovation and you're going to be fine, for example. Yeah, and everything else is just kind of like stacking up vuln damage, stacking up generic damage multipliers as much as possible, and then those vuln glyphs here, they have these legendary bonuses that I mentioned, increases the vuln damage here. So this is actually really nice because it buffs the damage to the target, and it also buffs the total victimized value, which goes to like pretty incredible damage. And then eventually you can hit like even hundreds of millions per victimized proc on like a really high-end setup, and it just kind of like decimates everything. So yeah, this is how that works. There's the 5 Paragon bots that go the best with that is Exploit Weakness, which is just the vulnerable damage proc. We have the No Witnesses, so we cast our Death Trap pretty frequently because we reset it with Preparation. That gives us a damage buff, a damage reduction, and also pretty cool when you have runes. For example, the Petrify rune also counts as casting your ultimate skill. So this also triggers No Witnesses and Preparation, including the cooldown reset. And in this setup here, you'll trigger this like every few seconds. So you have this permanently, you get your cooldown resets all the time, very cool stuff. Just to make sure you stack up a bit of ultimate skill damage, which we do here with, for example, a temper. And then a bunch of stuff here on a No Witness board. Here's Deadly Ambush. This is mostly something for the bosses. You just put down the caltrops on the boss. You also have, for example, 1 caltrops duration temper. That just makes it much more easy to keep this up because you can throw it, for example, before a stagger phase on the boss, and then it will last the entire stagger phase. And you can just keep blasting into the boss. And we have a Cheap Shot here. This also has a bunch of nice damage reduction, life nodes, rest nodes, and so on. So these are all really good boards. We have really good glyphs that go with that. The 3 and vulnerable glyphs here, and then Control and Headhunter. This is a new glyph that has been added that way. You just stack up normal nodes. It's a bit like the old AOZ glyph in Radius, and you get like a bigger damage modifier basically. So that's it for the overview of the Victimize rogues in Season 6. It looks really good. I would not actually be surprised to see a bit of a nerf even to Victimize because of just how easily it actually progressed through the difficulties. As I mentioned, I did actually a Barrage Victimize run and later Dance Victimize build, basically from 0 to Torment 4, and that was fairly easy all the way, even though early game I didn't really have, you know, all these lucky hit modifiers, all this vulnerable damage stacking. It seemed to be like a very smooth progression all the way, which I mean is a good thing, but maybe a bit on the strong side to be fair. So we'll see, but for now it is definitely looking like top tier choices and multiple possible setups. The one thing that I am kind of sad about is that we have now so many builds on the rogues where they just use a core skill as kind of like a delivery method for a certain other proc. So we had this with Andario's rogue for a while now in Season 4 and Season 5. We had like no Puncture Andariels, Barrage Andariels, Flurry Andariels. And it's kind of the same story with Victimize. Basically anything that can be played with Andariels can be played with Victimize. They're effectively the same setup, just one is dot and one is crit build. So Victimize can crit, and you just try to stack like all these like crit modifiers as well, instead of like dot modifiers. But overall they kind of work exactly the same. So that is a bit sad, and I hope that we're gonna get a bit more viability for like the real builds, like, you know, a real flurry build that actually does flurry damage, and a real barrage build that actually does barrage damage. There are ways to play those as well, and they are also generally fairly strong. Actually, I would not be surprised to see, for example, a precision barrage build also clear Pit 100, or similar with flurry, maybe not 100, but maybe it gets pretty close. I have to test this again with, for example, a poison flurry variant. This might be even possible. On Piercing Blades, for example, another melee skill, I have been able to do a Pit 100 relatively comfortably already. So maybe flurry can do the same. Overall, this is how it looks like. So Victimize, very strong in general, rogues, many good builds. So something to look forward to for the expansion, I think. Hope you enjoyed my little overview. Stay tuned for more stuff on the PTR. I have a lot of testing done and a lot more videos to make. So I'm gonna be pumping those out in the next days. So hope you liked this, and see you guys next time.